Hello, welcome to our final night before you get back from vacation reading Harry Potter. I just want to take a quick moment and thank all the lovely animals that have been my assistance and accompaniment during our little journey here, starting with Jake, Koala, Chickadee, Spring, Daisy, and last but never least, the parents of all, except the Chickadee and the Koala, Sally and Wolverine. My faithful assistant Foxy has been keeping everyone lovely over the course of our week. And as always, we're brought to you by our presenting sponsor, Birdie Bot's Every Flavor Beans, popcorn flavor. Much better than the booger flavor, which I did not have. And as always, my own very true to my heart presenting sponsor, coffee. With that, let's jump into our final reading. We're going to pick up at chapter 27, The Return of Padfoot. Harry's just completed the second Triwizard task and now has turned his attention elsewhere. Let's jump in. One of the best things about the aftermath of the second task was that everyone was very keen to hear details of what had happened down in the lake, which meant that Ron was getting to share the limelight for once. Harry noticed that Ron's version of events changed subtly with every retelling. At first, he gave what seemed to Harry to be the truth. It tallied with Hermione's story anyway. Dumbledore had put all the hostages into a bewitched sleep in Professor McGonagall's office, first assuring them that they would be quite safe and would awake when they were back above the water. 1 week later, however, Ron was telling a thrilling tale of kidnapping in which he had struggled single-handedly against 50 heavily armed merpeople who had to beat him into submission before tying him up. But I had my wand up my sleeve, he assured Padma Patil, who seemed to be a lot keener on Ron now that he was getting so much attention, and was making a point of talking to him every time they passed in the corridors. I could have taken those people anytime I wanted. What were you going to do? Snore at them? Said Hermione waspishly. People had been teasing her so much about being the thing that Victor Crumb would miss the most that she was in a rather touchy mood. Ron's ears went red, and afterwards he reverted to the bewitched sleep version of events. As they entered March, the weather became drier, but winds cruelly skinned their hands and faces every time they went out to the grounds. There were delays in the post because the bluster was knocking the owls off course. The brown owl that Harry had sent to Sirius with the date of the Hogsmeade weekend turned up at breakfast with half its feathers sticking up the wrong way. Harry had no sooner torn off Sirius's reply than it took flight, clearly afraid that Harry was going to send a reply. Sirius' letter was almost as short as the previous one. Be at the stiles at the end of the road out of Hogsmeade, past Dervish and Bangs, at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. Bring as much food as you can. He didn't come back to Hogsmeade, said Ron incredulously. Kind of looks like it, doesn't it, said Hermione. I can't believe him, said Harry tensely. If he's caught. He's made it far, though, hasn't he, said Ron. And it's not like the place is swarming with Dementors anymore. Harry folded up the letter, thinking. If he was honest with himself, he really wanted to see Sirius again. He therefore approached the final lesson of the afternoon, double potions, feeling considerably more cheerful than he usually did when descending the steps to the dungeons. Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle were standing in a huddle outside the classroom door, with Pansy Parkington's Pansy Parkington's gang of Slytherin girls. All of them were looking at something Harry couldn't see and snickering heartily. Pansy's pug face peered excitedly around Goyle's broad back as Harry, Ron, and Hermione approached. There they are, she giggled, and the knot of Slytherins broke apart. Harry saw that Pansy had a magazine in her hand, Witching Weekly. The moving picture on the front showed a curly-haired witch who was smiling toothily and pointing at a large sponge cake with her wand. You might find something there to interest you, Granger, Pansy said loudly, and threw the magazine at Hermione, who caught it, looking startled. At that moment, the dungeon door opened, and Snape beckoned them all inside. Harry, Ron, Hermione headed for a table in the back as usual. Once Snape had turned his back on them to write up the ingredients of today's potion on the blackboard, Hermione quickly rifled through the magazine under their desk. At last, in the center pages, Hermione found what they were looking for. Harry and Ron leaned in closer. A color photograph of Harry, entitled a short piece, Harry Potter's Secret Heartache. A boy like no other, perhaps, yet a boy suffering from all the usual pangs of teenage love, writes Rita Skeeter. Deprived of love since the tragic demise of his parents, 14-year-old Harry Potter thought he'd found solace in his steady girlfriend at Hogwarts, Muggle-born Hermione Granger. Little did he know he would shortly be suffering another emotional blow in a life already littered with personal loss. Miss Granger, plain but ambitious, seems to have a taste for famous wizards that Harry alone cannot satisfy. Since the arrival at Hogwarts of Victor Crumb, Bulgarian seeker and hero of the last World Quidditch Cup, Miss Granger has been openly toying with both boys' affections. Crumb, who is openly smitten with the devious Miss Granger, has already invited her to visit him in Bulgaria over the summer holidays and insists that he has never felt that way about any other girl. However, it might not be in Miss Granger's doubtful natural charms that have captured these unfortunate boys' interest. She's really ugly, said Pansy Parkington, a vivacious fourth-year student, but she'd be well up to making a love potion. She's quite brainy. I think that's how she's doing it. Love potions are, of course, banned at Hogwarts, and Albus Dumbledore will probably be investigating these claims. In the meantime, Harry Potter's well-wishers must hope that next time he bestows his heart on a worthier candidate. I told you, Ron hissed at Hermione as she stared down the arrow. I told you not to annoy Rita Skeeter. She's made you out to be a Scarlet Woman. Hermione stopped looking astonished and just started snorting with laughter. Scarlet Woman? She repeated, shaking with suppressed giggles as she looked over at Ron. It's what my mom calls them, Ron muttered, his ears going red. If that's the best Rita can do, she's losing her touch, said Hermione, as she threw Witching weakly onto the empty chair behind her. What a pile of old rubbish. She looked at the Slytherins, who were all watching her and Harry closely to see if they'd been upset by the article. Hermione gave them a sarcastic smile and wave, and they started unpacking the ingredients they'd need for their wit sharpening potion. There's something funny, though, said Hermione 10 minutes later, her pestle suspended over a bowl of beetles. How could Rita Skeeter have known? Known what? Said Ron. Have you been mixing up love potions? No, don't be stupid, Hermione snapped. It's just, how did she know Victor asked me to visit him over the summer? She blushed scarlet as she said this and determinedly avoided Ron's eyes. What? Said Ron, his pestle dropping with a loud clank. He asked me right after he pulled me out of the lake, said Hermione. After he'd got rid of his shark's head. Madame Pomfrey gave us both blankets, and he sort of pulled me away from the judges so they wouldn't hear, and he said if I wasn't doing anything over the summer, would I like to... What'd you say? Said Ron, who picked up his pestle and was grinding it on the desk, a good 6 inches from his bowl because he was staring at Hermione. Well, he did say he never felt the same about anyone else, Hermione went on, going so red now that Harry could almost feel the heat coming from her face. But how could Rita Skeeter have heard him? She wasn't there. Maybe she has got an invisibility cloak. Maybe she sneaked onto the grounds. Well, what'd you say? Said Ron, pounding his pestle down so hard it dented the desk. Well, I was too busy seeing whether you and Harry were okay to... Fascinating though your social life undoubtedly is, Miss Granger, said an icy voice behind them, and all three of them jumped. I must ask you not to discuss it in my class. 10 points from Gryffindor. Snape had glided over to their desk while they were talking. The whole class was now looking around at them. Malfoy took the opportunity to flash, Potter stinks! Across the dungeon at Harry. Oh, reading magazines under the table as well, Snape added, snatching up the copy of Witching Weekly. A further 10 points from Gryffindor, but... Oh, of course. Snape's black eyes glittered as they fell on Rita Skeeter's article. Potter has to keep up with his press clippings. The dungeon rang with the Slytherin's laughter, and an unpleasant smile curled Snape's thin mouth. To Harry's fury began to read the article aloud. Harry Potter's secret heartache. Dear, dear Potter, what's ailing you now? A boy like no other, perhaps. Harry could feel his face burning. Snape was pausing at the end of every sentence to allow the Slytherins a hearty laugh. The article sounded 10 times worse when Snape read it. Even Hermione blushed. Harry Potter's well-wishers must hope that next time he bestows his heart upon a worthier candidate. How very touching, sneered Snape, rolling up the magazine. Well, I think I'd better separate the three of you so you can keep your minds on potions than your apparently tangled love lives. Weasley, you stay here. Miss Granger beside Miss Parkinson. Potter, table in front of my desk. Move, now. Furious, Harry threw his ingredients in his bag and dragged it up to the front of the dungeon with his cauldron. Snape followed, sat at his desk, and watched Harry unload. Determined not to look at Snape, Harry resumed the mashing of his beetles, imagining each one to have Snape's face. All this press attention seems to have inflated your already overlarge head, Potter, said Snape quietly once the rest of the class had settled down. Harry didn't answer. He knew Snape was trying to provoke him. He'd done it before. No doubt he was hoping for an excuse to take around 50 points from Gryffindor before the end of the class. You might be laboring under the delusion that the entire wizarding world is impressed with you, Snape went on so quietly that no one else could hear him. But I don't care how many times your picture appears in the papers. To me, Potter, you're nothing but a nasty little boy who considers rules to be something far beneath him. Harry tipped the powdered beetles into his cauldron and started cutting up his ginger roots. His hands were shaking slightly out of anger, but he kept his head down, as though he couldn't hear what Snape was saying to him. So I give you fair warning, Potter, Snape continued in a softer, even more dangerous voice. Pint-sized celebrity or not, if I catch you breaking into my office one more time, I haven't been anywhere near your office, Harry said angrily, forgetting that he was deaf to what Snape said. Don't lie to me, Snape hissed, his fathomless black eyes boring into Harry's. Boom-slang skin, gillyweed, both come from my private stores, and I know who stole them. Harry stared at Snape, determined not to blink or look guilty. In truth, he hadn't actually stolen either of those things. Hermione had taken the boomslang skin 2 years ago, when they'd needed it for Polyjuice Potion, and while Snape had suspected Harry at the time, he'd never been able to prove it, in part because Harry hadn't taken it. Dobby, of course, had stolen the gillyweed. I don't know what you're talking about, Harry lied coldly. You were out of bed on the night my office was broken into, hipped Snape. I know it, Potter, I know it. Now, Mad-Eye Moody might have joined your fan club, but I will not tolerate your behavior. One more nighttime stroll into my office, Potter, and you will pay. Right, said Harry coolly, turning back to his ginger roots. I'll bear that in mind if I ever get the urge to go in there, which I won't. Snape's eyes flashed. He plunged a hand into the inside of his black robes. For one wild moment, Harry thought Snape was about to pull out his wand and curse him. Then he saw that Snape had drawn out a small crystal bottle of completely clear potion. Harry stared at it. Do you know what this is, Potter? Said Snape, his eyes glittering dangerously yet again. No, said Harry in complete honesty this time. It is Veritaserum, a truth potion so powerful that 3 drops would have you spilling your innermost secrets for this entire class to hear, said Snape viciously. Now, the use of this potion is controlled by very strict ministry guidelines, but unless you watch your step, you might just find that my hand slips. He shook the crystal bottle ever so slightly, right over your evening pumpkin juice. And then, Potter, then we'd just find out if you've been in my office or not. Harry said nothing. He turned back to his ginger roots once more, picked up the knife, and started slicing them again. He didn't like the sound of the truth potion at all, nor did he put it past Snape to slip him some. He repressed a shudder at the thought of what might come spilling out of his mouth if Snape did it. Quite apart from landing a whole lot of people in trouble, Hermione and Dobby for starters, there are all the other things he was concealing, like the fact that he was in contact with Sirius, and his inside squirmed at the thought how he felt about Cho Chang. He tipped his ginger roots into the cauldron too, and wondered if he ought to start taking a leaf out of Professor Moody's book and drink only from a private hip flask. There was a knock on the dungeon door. Enter, said Snape in his usual voice. The whole class looked around as the door opened. Professor Karkaroff came in. Everyone watched him as he walked up toward Snape's desk. He was twisting his finger around his goatee and looking agitated. We need to talk, said Karkaroff abruptly when he had reached Snape. He seemed determined that nobody should hear what he was saying, that he was barely opening his lips. It was like he was a really bad ventriloquist. Harry kept his eyes on his ginger roots, but listened hard. I'll talk to you after my lesson, Karkaroff, Snape muttered, but Karkaroff interrupted him. I want to talk now. You can't slip off, Severus. You've been avoiding me. After the lesson, Snape snapped. Under the pretext of holding up a measuring cup to see if he'd poured out enough armadillo juice, Harry sneaked a sidelong glance at the pair of them. Karkaroff looked very worried, and Snape looked very angry. Karkaroff hovered behind Snape's desk for the rest of the double period. He seemed intent on preventing Snape from slipping away at the end of class. Keen to hear what Karkaroff wanted to say, Harry deliberately knocked over his bottle with 2 minutes to go before the bell, which gave him an excuse to duck down behind his cauldron and mop up while the rest of the class banged noisily through the door. "What's so urgent?" he heard Snape hiss at Karkaroff. "This," said Karkaroff, and squinting around the edge of his cauldron, Harry saw Karkaroff pull up the left-hand sleeve of his robe and show Snape something on his inner forearm. "Well," said Karkaroff, making every attempt not to move his lips, "do you see? It's never been this clear. Never since—" "Put it away," sniffed Snape, his black eyes sweeping the classroom. "But you must have noticed," Karkaroff began in an agitated voice. "We can talk later, Karkaroff," spat Snape. "Potter, what are you doing?" "Clearing up my armadillo bile, Professor," said Harry innocently, straightening up and showing Snape the soggy rag he was holding. Karkaroff strode out of the dungeon, looking both worried and angry, not wishing to remain alone with an exceptionally angry Snape. Harry threw his books and ingredients back into his bag and left at top speed to tell Ron and Hermione what he had just witnessed. I think we'll conclude there. Tomorrow, when you're back with me at home, we'll find out what Harry and Sirius have business with. And it'll be nice to see you all again. Love you guys. Talk to you later. Bye.